what I want to talk about is the controversy around this bracha of Shlo Asani Isha. Okay, the bracha that we say in the morning of basically blessing God who has not made me a woman, that men say. Okay, there are basically three brachas. Okay, Shlo Asani Goy, who has not made me a non-Jew. Shlo Asani Eved, who has not made me a slave. Shlo Asani Isha, who has not made me a woman. And women say Shlo Asani Kitzona, who has made me as you wished. Okay, according to your will. Okay, as you desired. Okay. Anyways, so on the surface, this bracha may seem derogatory, because you're basically saying, "Oh, good God, good. It's lucky for me that I am not made a woman." Okay, so it seems to be a little bit derogatory. So this raises a little bit of an issue. Is this bracha actually derogatory or not? So if you look in terms of the commentaries on the Gemara, this issue is actually brought down in the Gemara Menachot 43b. It's also in the Tosefta of Brachot. I forget which chapter right now. I might have mentioned it in the blog. I don't think I did though. Okay. Fortune say basically this is in the context of mitzvot, that there is a distinction between non-Jews and Jews, and the fact that Jews have more mitzvot. And the same thing, men have more mitzvot because women are not commanded in time-oriented positive commandments. So it is not a statement about the inherent value of a woman or men or non-Jews or whatever. It's basically saying that there's a value in having more mitzvot. Now that itself is an issue in its own right. Okay, and Cheryl, you may want to make that part of our list. Why is there a value in having more commands? Okay, the fact is that this is found in the Gemara. It's an issue from a Mishnah in Makot. The last Mishnah in Makot says that God wished to Zaka wishes to enhance or wants to benefit the Jewish people, so he gave them more mitzvot. Okay, something, Alex. There are other people who mention their argument as well, that basically, even though men and women are equal, in certain ways, a woman's job may be more difficult than a man's job. Just it's harder to be a woman, Okay, so thank you, so thank God you have a leisure job. But the classical idea is I have more mitzvot. And this is tied to the last Mishnah in Makot. The last Mishnah in Makot says, Rosh Hashanah Baruch Hu, Zachetz Yisrael, God wanted to benefit the Jewish people. He brought them Torah mitzvahs, so he gave them many more mitzvot. Okay. Now, before I should point out, why is that actually a benefit? The fact that we have more commandments also means you can mess up more. So it's not. So why is it such a good thing to have more commandments and things of that nature and so forth and so forth? So that's what I'm saying. It's a deep philosophical issue that we can get into and discuss. But this bracha is not a statement that basically says men are better than women. That's not what this bracha is about. Okay, but people can see it and perceive it to be derogatory. So this has always been an issue. This has been an issue for years. The truth is that if you look in the conservative prayer book, you will find that conservative Judaism does not say this bracha. In conservative Judaism, they say different brachot, more in a positive sense. She'asani Israeli, you have made me a Jew. She'asani ben Chorin, you have made me a free man. Okay. In terms of the other mitzvot and so forth. Okay. So the question emerges about this bracha. That's always been an issue, a little bit of an issue, because people walk in and they see Orthodox Jews saying this bracha, and it looks a little derogatory to women. Okay, even though from a Orthodox perspective, we have explanations for the bracha that that give us explanation that this is not derogatory to women. I mean, there's still issues. Why did God make this distinctions between men and women? That's another question. We will get back to for a sec. Okay. The fact is Cheryl is making a point over here as I say this, and she says, Rabbi, is it possible that it does mean that it does mean that this bracha implies that women are lesser, but we have reinterpreted to fit our modern sensibilities? There are people who argue that, Cheryl, but the fact is this argument actually is from many, many years ago. Rashi himself says that this bracha is specifically talking about mitzvot and who has more mitzvot and so forth. So the truth is that this understanding of this bracha as not being derogatory, but basically, according to many commentaries, basically saying, is making a distinction totally based upon the amount of commandments that are commanded. That seems to be very straightforward. Okay, even before modern times. Okay, but the truth is modern sensibilities may not be so happy with that answer anymore, because there is a feeling that you are being somewhat derogatory. And the truth is, and this is maybe another there's another aspect of the fact that, and this is an issue, is that men and women are different in Jewish thought. I mean, this is perhaps the hardest thing. We tend to say, what is the difference between men and women? So basically, it's some organs. Some people say there's no difference between men and women except for some organs. A little bit of a physical difference in some organs, and that's the only difference. If you accept that perception, then the extreme difference you find in halacha between men and women in so many different commandments is a whole issue in itself. There are so many differences in halacha between men and women. So it's obviously more. The distinction is obviously more than the reproductive organs. That's for sure. And a lot of times answers are given which I find simplistic. Like, for example, a lot of people say women are not commanded in time-oriented commandments because as mothers they can't be commanded to do the mitzvot because they have to be thoughtful of their child. Okay, so therefore that's why they're exempt from time-oriented commandments. I find that answer extremely problematic. First of all, make a distinction based on motherhood. Say that a woman who has a child is exempt. Okay, and you find other cases like that. Okay, but the argument about that is, let's understand this, that you're saying a woman cannot take a lulav and etrog, right? Because she has to be involved with children. But the truth is, all women do take lulav and etrog. So if it was really a big issue, they shouldn't be taking lulav and etrog. So it's a real problem. On the other hand, there are other mitzvot which take up more time, which women are expected to do. It's like women are expected to do Kriyas Megillah. So that's 45 minutes Purim night and Purim afternoon. That they have to work it out with their husbands, so forth and so forth. But to take a lulav and etrog, that they're exempt from. So I don't buy a lot of this. I think it's a very deeper issue, and it's something that I think too many people present simplistic answers to. The truth is I once spent a lot of time on the issue of the distinction between men and women. If you go through all the halachas of distinctions, so it's a lot of the simplistic answers I really have problems with. Anyways, but the truth is, this bracha is clearly stated that it's a statement about. It seems, according to most commentators, it's a statement about mitzvot. Okay, But in our world today, this is looked upon as derogatory. And I've already mentioned that the conservative movement, actually 100 years ago, already started changing this bracha. So this statement was made. And you'll see right in the first line over here, there's a Orthodoxy blog, which is a left-wing Orthodox blog. Okay, it's from individuals involved in the more left-wing side of Orthodoxy, and there's a certain tension happening in Orthodoxy now, as there is a certain segment that is very strongly to the left, with a tremendous amount of issues between them and more of the normative Orthodox, and a lot of things to do in women's issues. Orthodoxy is connected to Yeshiva Chovei Torah. It's connected to Rabbi Avi Weiss, who is the gentleman who ordained the woman rabbah, who theoretically is ordained woman like rabbi. Okay, I'm not going to get into that now, which obviously is a whole tension within the Orthodox world, and so forth and so forth. Anyways, so this individual, a person who's involved in that organization, I think it's called the International Rabbinic Forum or something like that, a new rabbinic organization or whatever. This individual over here, Rabbi Kanevsky, wrote an article that says he does not actually, there's two rabbis involved, Rabbis Kanevsky and Lopatin, but Rabbi Kanevsky sort of wrote was the initial one who sort of made the statement that he no longer says this bracha. And actually it seems he put up a blog post on this more orthodoxy, a blog which was very powerful in its language. From what I've heard, he actually said that a continued statement saying of this bracha is like a chil Hashem, because so many people looks bad, and so forth and so forth. And then that post was taken down, and he put up a little bit more tamer presentation of his ideas, which is the only post that I saw. So Rabbi Kanevsky and Lopatin said that we should no longer we are no longer what do you call it? We no longer say this bracha of Shelo Asani Isha. Okay, now Alex asked me, does it have any influence at all outside of a few modern Orthodox congregations in Manhattan and Riverdale, where most members are not particularly observant? The truth is, though, is that this is maybe another issue that Cheryl you may want to talk about. Is the comparisons and distinctions between the left-wing Orthodox movement and the conservative movement of the 1800s. The fact is that a few of the modern Orthodox congregations where they are involved with, people actually are observant. Rabbi Kanevsky's synagogue is actually in Los Angeles. So I don't know how many synagogues are involved, but I do know that they're a little bit more than you just say just in Manhattan, Riverdale. But I mean, it's not powerful. The point is that things start somewhere and then grow from there, and so forth. And my objective is not simply to say this is wrong or whatever. Our objective is to investigate what's going on here and so forth. Okay? The real issue here is not whether they're going to be successful or not. The real issue here is to understand the issues that are problematic in this movement. See, I'm not interested in attacking this system and saying it's wrong or whatever it is, like this idea. I'm just interested in saying, okay, what can I learn about Torah from this? This individual presents a Torah argument, what he believes is a Torah argument, and rather than just dismissing him because I don't like what his conclusion is going to be, let's look at that argument. That's really what I want to do now, because it shows some issues in the argument. Okay? By the way, Alex, you make a statement that you asked this question because something like this would be unthinkable. To say the Shelo Asani Isha, you should take out that bracha, is unthinkable in any congregation in Brooklyn, no matter where on the Orthodox spectrum. The fact is that has to be true with more Orthodox congregations. I think that this is suggestion, like if you look at Orthodoxy across the spectrum, this is suggestion on the left wing, on the extreme left wing. And the question arises, okay, so what makes something left-wing Orthodoxy and not right-wing conservative Judaism? I mean, Yatid Ne'aman, which is the newspaper connected to right-wing, to the Haredi world, to Aguda. I think it actually was a newspaper from Aguda or whatever, but Yatid Ne'aman has already written that they believe that these movements or these individuals are actually no longer Orthodox. They are conservative, and they have a whole argument. There's actually on the Nishma website, and I'm going to take you to the Nishma website right now for a second, because there's an article you may want to read, which sort of talks about this from another perspective of looking at what is, are they Orthodox anymore or not? Okay, hold on one second. Well, that statement and I'll bring you to it in a sec. Okay, do you guys see this article now from the website? Hello? You guys see this article? Hello? You guys see this article? Okay, this is an article called Yatid and YCD, Substance and Methodology. This is an article a few years ago that basically Yatid described the Yeshiva Chovevei Torah as conservative. Now this is interesting in the sense that there's one thing to say I disagree with the policies of this yeshiva. There's another thing to say the yeshiva is no longer within the parameters of orthodoxy. That's part of what the issue is that's going on over here. And okay, now I'm just going to go back to the blog again. Okay, I want to take you back to the article that we're looking at over here, and and that's really what's going on over here. In other words, what the issue is that there's one thing to say I disagree with your position. There's another thing to say it's you're outside the pale. Alex, I believe that YCT graduates are still not accepted in the RCA, but there are people who, well, there's an issue with this. It's still under investigation and so forth. There are people who are teachers at YCT who are members of the RCA. Now, of course, Rabbi Weiss, the founder of YCT, is a member of the RCA. Okay, so there's issues of that nature. Anyways, but what I'm getting at here is the fact that the issue here is where do we draw the line? What is the distinction between saying, listen, I disagree with your position, I hold you're totally wrong in your position, but you are still within the pale within that position. Okay, and by the way, most people don't recognize it, that all we perceive in terms of differences and distinctions between people all emerge from an idea that was an argument, and one person disagreed with another person. Okay, so nowadays, when you see disagreements, they're disagreement, but they're still saying you are within the pale. You're still within the pale. But the point is that when are you at the end of the pale? Or when are you outside the pale? And that's part of these issues here. And this has come up with Shaloas Aniisha. It's become a statement where is this theory that you could say don't don't say this. That if is a person who has an argument not to say this bracha, even though I totally disagree with this person's position, but I'm not going to say that this argument is outside the parameters of orthodoxy. How can I say? Or do I say that this argument is totally unacceptable and outside the parameters? Okay, and I think that's an important issue. That's why this issue has emerged, in the sense of stating this, and therefore you have to look at this and say, okay, so let's look at this theory. And basically, there are three approaches that you could look at in arguing that we should no longer say this bracha, or Orthodox Jews should no longer say this bracha. There's three possible approaches. Okay? One approach is to study the Gemara and through the various commentaries and come to an understanding of the Gemara or understanding of the commentaries that can lead to a conclusion that there is no obligation to say this bracha, or that you can actually fulfill this obligation, the obligation behind the bracha, another way. That happens to be the approach that Rabbis Kanevsky and Lopatin actually are going to argue. I'm going to explain that in a few minutes. They're going to argue that there's a way of fulfilling according to certain commentators, there's a way of fulfilling the original Gemara's obligation without saying Shlos Ani Isha. Everything in halacha, and this is really what I'm talking about, is halacha emerges from Gemara. The Gemara makes statements. The commentaries attempt to understand what those statements mean for various reasons, questions, so forth and so forth. They come to conclusions. But their objective is to understand what Chazal, what the rabbis, what the sages of the Talmud are telling us in terms of the law. So the simple understanding of the Gemara, which is a straightforward understanding of the Gemara, it would seem, would be that you have to say the bracha Shlos Ani Isha. It seems to be the Gemara is telling you this is a bracha that should be said. Rabbis Kanevsky and Lopatin have a way of looking at this Gemara that leads to a conclusion that you can do other things and not have to say this bracha. Okay, we're going to talk about it in a sec. There are two other approaches that could lead to the same conclusion, that you don't say this bracha. One is an approach that says the bracha says Shlos Ani Isha, you didn't make us a woman, because the Gemara had a certain understanding of what it meant by woman. It did not mean female, like woman, like the feminine sex. It used the word woman to reflect a certain type of person. Okay? Now this argument is actually used in the context of of teaching women Torah. There's a statement in the Gemara, I think Gemara in Sota, that says that a father should not teach his daughter Torah. Okay, you should not teach, which comes out to be that you shouldn't teach women Torah. And this through the centuries has been discussed, debated, what the Gemara means, and so forth and so forth. One of the issues that emerge, if you look through the commentaries, is the Gemara says don't teach women Torah. What has been understood is the Gemara, when it uses the term woman in that case, doesn't mean the female sex. It's using the term woman in the sociological context of that time. Women had a certain sociological behavior. Women were perceived a certain way within that society because that's the way women acted in that society. They weren't educated, they weren't involved in the intellectual debates and so forth and so forth. Therefore, there are people who say that when the Gemara says don't teach women Torah, what it's really saying is not don't teach people of the feminine sex Torah, it's saying don't teach individuals who may not put that much intellectual effort into the studies. You shouldn't teach them. Okay? In other words, a little bit of knowledge is a bad thing. Okay, so someone who's not going to put in the requisite effort in terms of understanding the lesson and the ideas, better not to teach them. That could be one way of understanding it. Obviously, nowadays, that women are involved in intellectual pursuits. Okay, it's a different definition of Isha. So, okay, so that's one possibility. So, could you say that the Gemara is talking about a certain definition of Isha, which says Shlosani Isha, and that does not applicable anymore? You could argue that, but that would be a problematic argument, because I already told you that the distinction that most commentators understand in terms of the Gemara is based upon how many mitzvot you have. Okay? How many mitzvot you have. And the fact is women are not commanded in the same number of mitzvot as men. Period. And that applies in our age as well. There's another, so that's one approach, but that's not the approach of Rabbi Kanevsky and Lopetin. Okay? Another approach that could be thrown out was that there's clearly an obligation Shlos Ani Isha, but to say this bracha, but in our present world, if we say this bracha, there will be repercussions, negative repercussions. So there are certain people who argue, listen, if you're really concerned about that, say this bracha quietly at home. There are rabbis who advocate to not say this bracha out loud in the synagogue. Not because there's no obligation. Of course there's no obligation to say the bracha, but nowadays in the synagogue, if you say this bracha out loud and people notice it, it will have a negative consequence, because the people who are hearing it may not know the original reason of the bracha and understand it in a negative fashion. And that also has backing within Jewish law, where sometimes we actually are concerned about our behavior because it might have negative repercussions. So, for example, there's certain places where we did self-censorship on the Talmud. We are the ones who censored the Talmud because we were concerned that it would be misunderstood. Okay, so that might be an argument as well. But again, that was not Rabbi Kanevsky and Lopetin argument. Those arguments would not be simple arguments. They're arguments that would yield a lot of tension within Orthodoxy as well. But they are arguments that most likely would not have challenged Rabbi Kanevsky and Lopetin to say they're outside the pale. What though was Rabbi Kanevsky and Lopetin's argument? So the truth is they have a sort of developed argument like this. The Tosefta in Brachot, which is where I mentioned to you as one of the sources, the Tosefta in Brachot has the language that there are three blessings. Shlo Asani Goy, you did not make me a non-Jew. Shlo Asani Ish, you did not make me Shlo Asani Evid, you did not make me a slave. Shlo Asani Isha, you did not make me a woman. The Gemara in Menachos has a different girsa. Okay, if you look at our Gemara in Menachos, if you open up a text of our Talmud in Menachos, you will find a completely different reading. There, the reading is that there are three brachas, but the first bracha is not Shlo Asani Goy. The first bracha is Asani Yisraeli. You have made me a Jew. The second bracha is Shlos Ani Isha, and the third bracha is Shlos Ani. Second bracha is Shlos Ani Evan, third bracha is Shlos Ani Isha. So the fact is that's the way the Gemara, the Gemara in our Gemara says, is that there's no bracha of Shlos Ani Goy, it's a bracha of Shlos Asani Yisraeli. Okay. Now the truth is actually a disagreement. It seems to be a disagreement of what actually is the correct language, or the correct, as we say, girsa, actual reading text. What is the correct text of our Gemara? Even though it's printed as Shasani Israeli that we have, it seems that this is not so simple what the exact text is. The Rambam clearly seems to be the text is Shlos Ani Goy. From the Rif, Rabbeinu Fasi, the text seems Shlos Ani Goy. It seems to be that the Rosh might have had the text of Shasani Yisraeli. There's a disagreement about whether the Rosh had a text of Shasani Yisraeli or not, but it seems to be, okay, that he might have had that text. The Vilna Gaon says that the text of the Rosh is Shesani Yisraeli. Okay, so the first thing that these gentlemen argue is that we should say Shesani Yisraeli. Rather than saying the negatives, that didn't make me this, you made me a Jew. Thank God for making me a Jew. Then they quote a statement of the Bach. The Bach is a commentary called the Bayit Hadash, which is a commentary on the Tur Shulchan Aruch. The Bach is, 1500s or whatever. The Bach said major halachic figure. The Bach says that if you happen to say the bracha Shasani Yisraeli, then you should no longer say the bracha Shlo Asani Isha and Shlo Asani Avid, because once you say that bless God for making me a Jew, well, included in saying I'm a Jew is that you're a woman and you're that you are a man and that you are a not a slave. Okay, the slave they're talking about here is called an Eved Kanani, which is a non-Jewish slave. Actually, his status is somewhat of a secondary status as a Jew. He actually has to go through a process of conversion. But the fact is that's what they're talking about here. But the fact is, once you say Shasani Israeli, then by definition, you are saying, I am made a male Jew, a free male Jew. That's what we mean by Shasani Israeli. So by definition, you are not you even cannot say the negative brachas anymore. Okay, you cannot say Shlosani Isha and Shlosani Av. So Rabbi Kanevsky and Lopatin says, here's the answer. Okay, we have people who say that the correct text is Shasani Israeli. Fine. And we have a commentator, a major commentator, the Bach, who says that if you say Shasani Israeli, you no longer should say Shasani Shlosani Isha and Shlosani Avid. Therefore, this is the answer. Since there are texts of the Gemara that says Shasani Yisraeli, we can do that, and since the Bach says that mitzvah exempts, that bracha exempts the other two brachas, this is what we should be advocating now. Everyone should say Shasani Yisraeli. Men should say in the morning rather than 3 blessings, 1 blessing, and that's the argument of these 3 people, of these 2 rabbis. Now, a lot of people obviously don't like that argument. Okay, they say that this argument is totally problematic. It's because you can't go around changing the liturgy, the Jewish liturgy, and they take arguments like this and they say, listen, you can't do that. You can't take arguments that change the liturgy. That's going too far. And I think that's a legitimate argument. I think that their argument is based on this, based on that, but it's obviously going against the major force of tradition and commentaries. Okay, obviously we've been saying these 3 blachas for years, number 1, and number 2, most commentators do have it of these 3 brachas, but they have come up with what they feel to be a halachic possibility that allows them to no longer say to Shlosani Isha. Okay, and other people say that's wrong. So usually people argue back and forth that they're outside the pale because they shouldn't be doing this, and so forth and so forth. I have a real problem with this whole thing. I think this is something that's extremely important to recognize. And this is why I wanted to talk to you guys about it tonight. I think that their argument is inherently problematic. And I go back to the original distinctions between conservative and Orthodox Judaism. What was the real distinction between the early conservative Jews, early conservative arguments, and Orthodox arguments? Back in the 1800s, what were the differences there? Even the early Reform. The fact is the early presentations in the conservative movement, the Reform movement, they also attempted to use halachic arguments to come to certain conclusions. Okay? It's not like modern day conservative. conservative Jews of the late 1800s, and be very hard pressed to find the distinction between the great conservative rabbis of the late 1800s and Orthodox rabbis today. When you think of individuals such as Shlomo Schechter, for us to look at Shlomo Schechter as a conservative, I'll tell you, if Shlomo Schechter was around today, you'd think he was a Haredi. I mean, the fact is, well, that's a little bit maybe too much, but the point is that they were not. They were very committed to halacha in certain levels. They say by Zechariah Frankel, who was the founder of the, or at least a major, I think the founder, but also the major dean of the Breslau Seminary in Germany in the 1800s. There were three major seminaries. There was a Reform Seminary, and I forget where that was, but it also went by a certain city. And then there was the Orthodox Cemetery, the Hildesheimer Cemetery in Berlin, which was Orthodox, and then there was the Breslau Seminary. But the fact is that Zechariah Frankel, when they have pictures of him, and he had payas. Okay, so and a lot of people say he was a big Talmid Chacham. He was, there's a lot of arguments that Hildesheimer had tremendous respect for him. So the distinction's not there. But I like to look at a certain distinction, okay, and that's the distinction that bothers me in terms of this presentation here, and I think this is what marks orthodoxy. See, the argument they give seems to be pretty logical. There is a form in the Gemara that says She'asani Yisraeli. There is a viewpoint that does say She'asani Yisraeli exempts you from all the other blessings, the other two blessings. So you put them together, you have a conclusion that says, hey, let's do this now. The problem is that logically, you can't put these two things together. And what I always found to be the strength of orthodoxy is that what we do in orthodoxy is we attempt to be honest in our statement of the Gemara. Hey, Alex, I'm going to explain what I mean by all this in a sec. Okay? It's not the fact that I'm upset with their conclusion. It's their methodology that I find problematic. And the thing that I've always felt in terms of what makes something orthodox is that I believe that you can have a lot of reasons for why you're rereading Gemara, investigating a halacha, a lot of reasons of why you're involved in the search and discussions and stuff like that. But the bottom line is when I come up with an argument of how to understand the Gemara, or I come up with an argument that says, this is what I think is correct, I have to believe that I can make that argument before the Rambam, or before Moshe Rabbeinu, or before Rabbi Akiva. And they could say, yes, that is a possible argument, even if they disagree with the argument. What happens in orthodoxy is once an argument is presented, it has to be an argument that is inherently consistent and logical. Okay? And it holds up across time, using Eddie's terms. So let me tell you what the problem is with this argument. I wrote about this in this post here. That's why I'm going to it. The Gemara says in Menachot, like this. It says, Rabbi Meir says, okay, that a person should say 3 brachot. Okay? And then there's a question in text of what those 3 brachot are. Okay? One text says the 3 brachot are She'asani Yisraeli, you've made me a Jew. Shelo Asani Isha, you have not made me a woman. Shelo Asani Eved, you have not made me a slave. There's another girsa which we have, another text, another reading of the text, okay, or presentation of what's the correct text, that the 3 blessings are Shelo Asani Goy, you did not make me a non-Jew. Shelo Asani Eved, you did not make me a slave. Shelo Asani Ish, you did not make me a woman. Okay. The fact is that the major point of that Gemara is that Rabbi Meir says there are 3 blessings. That's what he says over there. There are 3 blessings. Now, then the question is, what is the 3 blessings? Now, these gentlemen say, well, there is a Gemara that says you can say Shasani Yisraeli, so why don't we just say that because of the Bach's argument? But the Bach's argument was, remember, the Bach is one who says, if you say Shasani Yisraeli, you'd be exempt of saying Shlo Sani Isha and Shlo Sani Eved. The Bach's argument actually is that he contends that the correct reading of the text must be Shelo Sani Goy, thank you that you did not make me a non-Jew, because because if you would say the bracha Shasani Yisraeli, if you say the bracha of making you a Jew, of blessing God because you made you a Jew, by definition you'd be exempt of the other 2 brachot. So the Bach's argument is that the correct reading of the text has to be Shlo Sani Goy, Shlo Sani Isha, Shlo Sani Eved, because if the correct reading was Shlo Sani Yisraeli, the other 2 brachot would be superfluous. Therefore, it must be that the 3 brachos Shlo Sani Goy, Shlo Sani Isha, Shlo Sani Eved. But the whole Bach's position is that these are the 3 blessings. And the Gemara's argument is there has to be 3 blessings. Good. Those people who say that the correct reading of the text is Shasani Yisraeli, they don't agree with the Bach's argument that if you say Shasani Yisraeli, you'll be exempt of the other 2. Because they hold the text to say, here are the 3 blessings, and one of them is Shasani Yisraeli. Do you understand the logic of what I'm presenting here? And by the way, this is consistency in halachic analysis, which most people do not see. You go back to a Gemara text, you see all these different theories and so forth and so forth, but as you present the different theories, you have to maintain the logic that led to the different theories, and you have to be consistent in that logic. If you say that what the Rabbis Kanevsky and Lopatin have done is they said, hey, we're relying upon the correct reading of the text Shasani Yisraeli, and we're relying upon the Bach's argument that if you say Shasani Yisraeli, you don't have to say the other 2 blessings. But the fact is you can't connect the 2. Because if you believe that the correct reading of the text is Shasani Yisraeli, then by definition you would have to disagree with the Bach's argument that Shasani Yisraeli exempts you from the other 2. And if you agree with the Bach's argument that Shasani Yisraeli would exempt you from the other 2, by definition the Bach's very own argument is you can't accept the Girsa, the reading of the text, to be Shasani Yisraeli. And that is behind halachic analysis. You can't take one from one and one from 2. Halachic analysis consistently demands logical consistency. So when you hear, oh, there's this theory and there's that theory in the halakha and so forth, you can't put them together. Perhaps the most famous example of this is when you can daven Mincha Marav. Let's say on an early Friday night. You know, we make Mincha Marav early Friday night before sunset. Okay, so if you notice, that's because there's a disagreement in the Mishnah in Brachot of when does the time for Mincha end and when does the time of Marav begin. When does the afternoon prayer end and when does the evening prayers begin? So one position of Tanna Kama, is sunset marks it. You can pray Mincha till the end of sunset, or some people say the end of Seitzah Chavim, or the end of the day, whether the day is sunset or the day when the stars come out. That's a further argument, but they hold you can pray Mincha to the end of the day, and then Marav begins with night. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda, I think it's Rabbi Yehuda, if I remember correctly, he says no, the deciding point is what he calls Plug HaMincha. Plug HaMincha is an hour and a quarter before the end of the day. So he holds that an hour and a quarter before the end of the day is the dividing line between Mincha and Marav, and that's what we do Friday afternoons when we want to accept Shabbos early and daven early. We say we're going to follow the defining mark, the border of Rabbi Yehuda, and we'll pray Mincha before plug, and then we'll pray Marav after plug, and with the prayer in Marav we'll bring in Shabbat. So the question emerges: what about saying Mincha and Marav between plug and the end of the day? In other words, you're following for Mincha, you'll follow the position of the rabbis that say Mincha is until sunset, or till the end of the day, and you're following the position of Rabbi Yehuda that says Marav can be said from plug and Mincha. So the simple answer is that you can't do that. Either you can daven Mincha before plug and Marav after plug, or you can follow Mincha before the end of the day and Marav at the end of the day. But you can't mix it up. Now there are certain exceptions, so forth and so forth, different issues, but the point is why? Because otherwise it would be called what is called a stira minehu bey, an inherent logical contradiction. You can't take one from position A and one from position B when they are both inherently logically contradictory. That's the problem in this argument. You can't say, I'm going to read the Gemara to say that the bracha is Shasani Yisraeli, and then say this bracha exempts you from saying Shlo Sani Isha, because that's a logical inconsistency. Because the Gemara says there's 3 brachas. And that's the problem. But by the way, this is not just a problem in left wing, or it's also a problem in right wing Orthodoxy. A lot of problems that exist. And it's something that I think is very fundamental to Orthodoxy. And what I've always believed is the conservative movement was much more open to hodgepodging it, to accepting arguments that did not meet the challenge of logical inconsistency. As long as they figured out some halachic argument where they sort of used halachic principles, the fact that the principles that they were using were contradictory, I don't think bothered the conservative movement. Because they weren't as committed to absolutely seeing the consistency over time. In the sense of what I said, that you're going to give your argument. If I have an argument, I have to really believe I can make that argument before the Rambam. Okay? I believe whenever I have a halachic argument, whenever I have a Gemara argument, I think I go up to them and say, gee, I think that this Sforah would hold. Okay? Okay. Now, the truth is, Alex, that's a good question. In many ways, they were committed Orthodox Jews. Maybe they were more lenient people. The fact is that's where it started. That's why there was obviously something in the roots of their commitment that allowed them that openness, and that's perhaps where the conservative movement started waning away. The fact is that's my belief that. And this is just from my own perception. I'm not a historian. I don't know. I think that the first conservative movements were very, very committed observant Jews. I think they were motivated to find leniencies because they felt they had to deal with America, and in that regard, what they were really trying to do, the original conservative Jews in America, were to try bringing people back to tradition. Remember, the Reform movement was very powerful in America, and it totally ignored tradition. I mean, the first graduating class of Hebrew Union specifically served non-kosher food. So I think that a lot of the conservative people said we want to bring them back. So therefore, they had a strong motivation towards liberalism. The fact is I think that eventually what happened is that inherent in the conservative movement was weaknesses in, eventually with some of the people who were the scholars, weaknesses in understanding the divine power of the sources. See, in a certain way, they started waning on the structured sources. Therefore, they brought in a lot of historical arguments and so forth and so forth. And if the full Chumash wasn't written by Moshe Rabbeinu, it didn't matter, and all these things. In other words, they started breaking down the structure, the inherent logical foundations. See, the reason I look at a Gemara and I say, listen, this is a statement of Chazal, I have to take it very seriously. And I have to take it that, and the roots are in Torah Sheba'al Peh, which comes from God. Okay? I think that they allowed a little bit more leeway in their basic philosophical, theological structure, which allowed them to be more creative in their arguments. Okay? And it really focuses on what did you actually believe. And that's why the early conservative movement, the first challenge was the question of, was Torah really from Shemayim, or was it just like, partly from Shemayim, or whatever. See, once you start believing that some things were more hodgepodge from human beings, but we have to have some commitment to them, then you can believe that you can start playing games. By the way, this is Reform Judaism really believed it. Reform Judaism believes that Chazal played these type of games. They just wanted to come up with some argument. Like you hear Rabbi Skanevsky and Lopatin's argument, it sounds from. I mean, it sounds like from the Gemara. There's a gersa like this, and this argument put them together. I mean, for the uninitiated mind, it sounds like a halachic argument, okay? But the fact is that it's orthodoxy, because orthodoxy accepts that the Torah has a divine origin, and that you are dealing with constructs that have its source in the divine, that you take it very seriously, and you have to actually apply it. It's like, you're treating it not like just a sort of hodgepodge of ideas that we use to sort of maintain our tradition. You deal with it as if you are trying to find the truth, and you are trying to understand what the Gemara's real statement is. Okay, and even though you will never know what the Gemara's real statement is, because because Rishonim and Achronim and so forth, and these were all scholars and so forth, but we're striving for the truth, and that's really what happened. And I think they moved away from that perception. Okay. Now, I'm not trying to argue that these rabbis are conservative or whatever. I really don't buy that. Okay, and I think they have a commitment to Torah and to mitzvot and so forth and so forth. And I think they're motivated by things by honest feelings. I think that they feel that this bracha shel Sanei Isha is upsetting women in their community, or women that come into their shuls and so forth, and they have problems with it for whatever reasons. But the fact is that their argument that they present is not logically consistent. And that's the real mark of orthodoxy. You need logical consistency. It has to work out. Okay? And that's really what bothers me on this. Okay, now the truth is I always see weaknesses in the right wing as well. I mean, a lot of arguments, I hear people throw out an argument like, this rabbi says this rabbi says that. Wait a second. Let's see if those two opinions can coexist. Okay, or whether they're contradictory. Okay? Alex, you're writing in something. Okay, I want to actually read what Alex wrote before. By the way, there's also the issue of slippery slope. But the fact is that I'm not as concerned about slippery slope if there's logical consistency. Okay. Okay. Alex asked a question. Is a legitimate question? Asks who their community is consistent. The fact is, one of the major differences between the more left-wing movement in Orthodox today and the original conservative movement is that the conservative movement never had a lay observance level. See, people don't know this, but the conservative movement believed in Shabbos and Kashrus and Taras Mishpacha. If you look in the conservative law books, women had to go to mikveh, and they only said person who's not near a shul, right, can drive to the shul. But obviously they themselves said that it's more important to walk to shul. You shouldn't drive at all. I mean, there's a lot of people who recognize that being an observant conservative Jew is almost like being an observant Orthodox Jew in many ways. In many ways not, but it was also considered. But you never really had an observant laity in the conservative movement. How many people in the conservative movement want to look up the conservative halachas and say, "Oh yeah, I want to be an observant Jew," as understood from the conservative movement? In other words, I'm going to walk the Shul on Shabbos and I'm going to keep kosher pursuant to conservative rules, and I'm not going to. And my wife does go to mikvah. A woman says, or a wife goes to mikvah, or whatever. The fact is you never had that in conservative movement. Conservative movement was really an outreach to try and big reform into Judaism, and then it became other reasons. Okay. But the fact is that nowadays what happens is there's a tremendous population of Jews who are observant to a large extent. They keep Shabbos, they keep kosher, keep Taras Mishpacha. Okay, even let's say for example Sarah Hurwitz, the woman who received the title of Rabbah, she covers her hair. I mean, the fact is that she wears a hat pursuant to certain halachic opinions, but she follows halacha as she understands it. Okay, and I'm sure she keeps kosher and Shabbos and so on and so forth. I'm sure that I could eat in her house. But the fact is that you now have a laity that's involved in this idea. The thing I'm pointing out is that you still have to maintain logical consistency. Okay, I'm going to read one more point from Alex over here. I mean, if most of them are really not Orthodox Jews, and I'm not saying they're observant, and they are Orthodox Jews on what you would call an Orthodox Jews, in terms of Shabbos and mikvah and kashrus and so forth and so forth. Okay, then they're saying that many things will interfere with their sense of spiritual fulfillment, which is what many today are seeking when they join traditional congregations. The fact is in many ways, one of the problems is that they are finding that these things will actually give them a greater sense of spiritual fulfillment. See, one of the problems, is what your point is, Alex, is very interesting. Is a lot of people are coming into Orthodoxy looking for spiritual fulfillment. And then a lot of the movement on the left wing is because a lot of people feel they have to do this to get their spiritual fulfillment. See, I have a whole thing. There's an article I wrote called Spiritual Hedonism, which deals with the idea of a lot of people being motivated by spirituality. And I'm not saying that's bad or totally bad or whatever, but the fact is they're motivated in that spiritual hit. Like this is good. The point is, a lot of people find it in very right-wing situations, so forth, like Hasidus or whatever. A lot of people find that in the left-wing Orthodox movement, especially in terms of the relationship to women. Okay, a lot of women want to be involved in this because they can have more spiritual fulfillment. And that's actually one of their arguments. The argument of extending to women is because women want to be more spiritually involved as well. Okay, so that's a lot of it. I know I spoke to a woman who got an aliyah in one of these women's Torah reading services, and it was fulfilling to her. Okay, it's a person who's very spiritually sensitive and so forth. The fact is you're the movements. I'm just looking over here. You guys have written a bunch of things here. Alex, you wrote, well, I was wondering if it is a legitimate question to ask. Many traditionalists have been forced to move out of Orthodoxy by their congregations. That usually is not motivated by spirituality per se, although there is a spirituality in the Chabura movement, in the Chabura movement of that began out of conservative Judaism, and in those type of things they actually push the fact that we have to dance together, men and women have to dance together and feel this type of connection and so forth. Spirituality is a tremendous um, issue in itself.